Welcome. This is Lori Varn, and in this presentation I will explain a unit of instructional design that I outlined as part of the Principles of Instructional Design course at Franklin University. For this unit of design, the scenario was a nonprofit organization that works with families and couples. They have moved into teaching, and they have asked me as a designer to create a unit of instruction on active listening skills. This would be one in a series of different units of design or units of instruction that they would provide to married couples. So again, this was active listening skills was the focus of this design outline. I used the 5-phase ADDIE model in a curvilinear design as my process for instructional design of this unit. I like ADDIE. I like the 5-phase model. I think it's simple and flexible and easy to use. And you can see how I've labeled the ADDIE principles in this, although I've left evaluation out because that should happen throughout the process. So to start, I did an analysis of the learner, the goal, and the task. So we know that the target audience would be couples who have likely experienced conflict. Some additional analysis that I would propose doing would be a survey of couples to ascertain the general skill level of most couples when it comes to active listening skills, but also their attitudes and perceptions about active listening skills. I think those would be important things to know in designing a unit of instruction on active listening skills. As far as goal, in the scenario we're given, the organization has already stated what their goal is for us. The goal is a unit of instruction designed to teach learners how to listen with the intent to understand and empathize, so active listening. That is the agency's stated goal. And the agency did provide an online resource for the Mind Tools website, which outlines the 5 behaviors for effective active listening. And so I took those 5 behaviors and I considered those 5 behaviors to be component tasks of the whole task of active listening. So when I designed the objectives and I designed the course, I did it thinking about those 5 component tasks and the whole task of active listening. So these are those 5 behaviors or 5 component tasks: pay attention, show you're listening, provide feedback, defer judgment, and response, all of those being part of the whole task of active listening. Again, we already know what the goal is. It was stated for us. And the objectives that I came up with, I came up with 4 objectives. The first would be that learners will be able to list and describe the 5 behaviors of active listening in an online quiz. So at the conclusion of the course, there would be an online quiz, possibly part of a learning management system, that would assess whether they can list and describe those. Learners will be able to identify the use of the 5 behaviors of active listening when observing others in communication. So that would be either in-person observing others or perhaps watching some online videos and providing some feedback or discussion about them and identifying the behaviors they used or didn't, or where folks could have done better. The third objective was that learners would be able to use the 5 behaviors of active listening in active role play scenarios. So this would be something the instructor would assess in observing those learners either in person in class, or perhaps the learner might record themselves and the instructor would assess them in that way. And then finally, that learners will be able to effectively use the 5 behaviors of active listening in real life to reduce and avoid conflict, as self-reported in an online survey. So we would be surveying the learners before the unit of instruction and afterwards to determine through self-assessment how well they do at using those active listening skills, but also their confidence level in using those skills. So was there an increased confidence as well as assessed ability to use those skills? I think that was important. So strategies that I used Allen's 4 fundamental components as the basis to start outlining my strategies. I tried to keep all of the learning activities in the context of married couples using active listening skills. So not just general active listening skills, but the context of married couples. So any activities or scenarios were in the context of married couples and conflict and some of the common conflicts that they might have. Learners would be challenged to observe and identify the use of active listening skills. So again, they might do that live in class and watching each other do role play, or they might watch a video and then discuss it on a discussion board in terms of identifying those active listening skills and maybe where they thought people could do better. But also having plenty of time to do role play themselves in the classroom and applying what they've learned in real life and giving some self-assessment of that. And in terms of feedback, I thought about the feedback principles, and the first principles being that the scenarios are going to be simpler, so they're going to focus on component tasks first, then build up to the whole task. The scenarios will get more complex, and feedback will reduce. So at the beginning, I imagined in some of the active role play that they might be partially scripted, and then at the end there wouldn't be any script for folks. In terms of development, I imagined a lot of this happening in a learning management system, so I didn't really develop anything there. I imagined some discussion boards, some learning that folks would do online, and then they would be in class with an instructor. But I did take the time to create this infographic that illustrates those 5 behaviors of active listening. And this is just looking again at that ADDIE model that I used, and where we would implement with a pilot test and get feedback during and afterwards, so that if we needed to, we could curve back and reanalyze and redesign as needed. This concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to watching your presentations as well.